Can I tell you something that might sting a little before it heals? You have spent years trying to be more attractive to a man, and you were chasing the wrong definition the entire time. You've counted calories until the numbers ran your mood. You've studied the right things to say so you wouldn't scare anyone off. You've tried to be less too much and more easygoing, even when easygoing meant swallowing your own needs. You've shrunk yourself, softened your opinions, hidden your faith when it felt inconvenient at the dinner table, all in the name of being wanted by someone who may not have even deserved the effort. And somewhere in the middle of all that performing, you lost track of the woman you were actually made to be. Here's the truth nobody's told you, the qualities that make a woman unforgettable, the kind of woman a godly man notices across a room and thinks, there's something different about her, have almost nothing to do with your body, your hairstyle, or how well you can hide your feelings. They have everything to do with your soul. Today, I'm going to walk you through 11 qualities. Real ones, grounded ones, the kind that don't fade with age, don't require a ring size, and don't depend on anyone else's approval to be true. Stay with me until the end, because one of them is the quality most Christian women get completely backwards, and it's quietly sabotaging their relationships without them even realizing it. Let's begin. Before we get into the list, I want you to understand why this even needs to be said. We live in a culture that has trained women, even godly women, to believe attractiveness is a performance, something you achieve through effort, image, and control. So we obsess over what we look like on the outside, and we neglect the parts of us no camera can ever capture. But there's a completely different measuring stick available to us. Real beauty isn't found in the outward things, the hairstyles, the jewelry, the clothes, but in the hidden person of the heart, the quiet, steady qualities that don't announce themselves, but that people feel the moment they're in the room with you. That kind of beauty is precious, not outdated, not old-fashioned, precious. It doesn't expire, it doesn't wrinkle, it doesn't go out of style. While the world is selling you a beauty that fades by 50, this is a beauty that deepens by 50. I think about a woman I'll call Renee. Renee spent her 20s chasing the version of attractive she saw everywhere. Perfect body, perfect Instagram grid, always available, always agreeable, always ready with the right laugh at the right joke. She got attention, sure. Men noticed her. But she kept attracting the same type over and over. Men who wanted a performance, not a partner. Men who disappeared the moment she asked for something real. It wasn't until her 30s, after a painful breakup that cracked her wide open on her bathroom floor at 2 a.m, that she started asking a different question. Not how do I look more attractive, but who am I actually being called to become? That shift changed everything. Not because she stopped caring about her appearance. She still did her hair, still wore what made her feel beautiful, but because for the first time, her beauty had a foundation underneath it, instead of just a surface. And men noticed. Not the wrong kind of attention this time. The kind that respected her, that stayed, that asked real questions instead of just complimenting her outfit. That's what we're building today. Let's get into it. The first quality is spiritual depth, and I want to be careful here, because this isn't about how many verses you can quote, or how often you post something spiritual online for other people to see. It's about whether your relationship with God is real when nobody's watching, when there's no audience, when it's just you, a quiet room, and the honest state of your heart. Stillness matters here. Not striving, not performing devotion, just stillness. A woman with spiritual depth has learned to be still enough to actually hear from God, not just talk at Him during a crisis and go silent the rest of the time. Here's why this is magnetic. Psychologically speaking, people can feel the difference between someone who is anchored and someone who is anxious. A woman whose security comes from her relationship with God doesn't need constant reassurance from a man to feel okay. She's not checking his phone. She's not spiraling over a delayed text message for 3 hours. There's a settledness in her that other people, men included, find deeply restful to be around. Restfulness is rare. People remember how you made them feel, and calm is unforgettable in a world that's constantly buzzing. Think about Maria, a woman in her late 20s who used to panic every time a guy took more than an hour to respond to a text. Her anxiety wasn't really about the guy. It was about an unsteady foundation underneath her whole life. When she started actually sitting in silence in the mornings, even just 10 quiet minutes before her day started, something shifted in her. She wasn't looking to a phone screen anymore to tell her whether she was okay. She already knew she was okay, because something bigger than her circumstances had already told her so. Start with 5 minutes, not an hour, not a whole elaborate devotional plan you'll abandon in a week out of guilt. 5 minutes of silence, one honest sentence about how you're really doing, no performance required. Consistency over intensity, every single time. The second quality might surprise you, because it sounds more like therapy language than church language, but emotional self-awareness runs deeper than most of us give it credit for. Above all else, guard your heart, because everything you do flows from it. You cannot guard something you don't understand. A woman who doesn't know why she reacts the way she does isn't guarding her heart. She's being ruled by it, tossed around by whatever emotion shows up first. Here's what this looks like practically. Someone cancels plans last minute, and instead of just feeling annoyed, an emotionally aware woman can say, "I feel dismissed," and that touches an old wound about not being a priority to people. That's not weakness. That's mastery. That's a woman who has done the work of understanding her own inner world, instead of just reacting to it. I think of Jasmine, who used to explode at her boyfriend over what looked like small things, him being 15 minutes late, forgetting to text back after work. It wasn't until a mentor asked her a simple question, "What does his lateness make you believe about yourself?" that she realized something. Every time someone was late, she heard the echo of her father, who was chronically absent throughout her entire childhood. The anger was never really about 15 minutes. It was about a decade-old wound that had never once been named out loud. Emotional self-awareness doesn't make you less feminine, or less chill, or less fun to be around. It makes you someone who responds instead of reacts. And that kind of stability is rare, and rare things are always valuable, in people just as much as in anything else. This week, when you feel a strong emotion rise up in you, pause and ask yourself honestly, what is this really about? Write it down. Don't judge yourself for the answer. Just notice it. This next one confuses a lot of women, because we've been told gentleness and strength are opposites. They're not. They were always meant to travel together. There's a picture of a woman clothed with strength and dignity, not strength or dignity, but both, together, at the exact same time, in the exact same breath. A woman with gentle strength doesn't have to raise her voice to be taken seriously. She doesn't have to be harsh to hold a boundary firmly in place. She can say, calmly, "That doesn't work for me," and mean it completely, without drama, without apology, without needing to justify herself 17 different ways just to be believed. This is different from being a doormat, and it's different from being combative. It's the third way most of us were never actually taught growing up, because we were only ever shown the two extremes. Consider Angela, a woman who spent years believing that being agreeable was the same thing as being good. She said yes to things that drained her completely. She tolerated disrespect because she thought confrontation made her a bad person. But there's a real difference between meekness and weakness. True meekness is strength under control. It is never the absence of strength. When Angela finally learned to say, gently but firmly, "I love you, and I won't be spoken to that way," her relationships didn't fall apart like she feared they would. The healthy ones actually got stronger, and the ones that couldn't handle her boundaries revealed exactly what they had been all along. Practice one sentence this week. "I hear you, and here's where I stand." Say it calmly. No over-explaining. No apologizing for having a limit. Now, before we go further, I want you to notice something. Not one of these qualities has anything to do with your waistline, your face, or your Instagram filter. That should feel like relief. Because it means the version of attractive you've been chasing this whole time was never actually the finish line. This is. let's keep going. Discipline isn't a punishment. It's a form of love. Love directed toward your own future self, the woman you're becoming 5 and 10 years from now. Real discipline doesn't look like a woman lounging in chaos. It looks like a woman who rises early with intention, who manages her time, her home, her responsibilities, not out of anxiety, but out of respect for the life she's been given. That's not hustle culture dressed up in spiritual language. That's stewardship, plain and simple. A disciplined woman isn't perfect. She still misses days, still has messy seasons, still falls off her routines sometimes, but she has rhythms she returns to. She has a relationship with her calendar, her money, her body, her home that says, I take my life seriously because it was given to me on purpose. Think of Denise, who used to describe herself as just not a routine person, as if that were simply a fixed personality trait. But underneath that identity was actually fear. Fear that structure would reveal exactly how far behind she really was in her own life. When she finally built small routines, a morning quiet time, a weekly budget review, a consistent bedtime instead of endless scrolling, her confidence grew in a way that years of talking about her problems hadn't given her. Discipline built self-trust, and self-trust is deeply, quietly attractive in a way that's hard to fake. Pick one single area this week, your finances, your sleep, your quiet time, and build one small, sustainable rhythm. Not a total life overhaul, just one rhythm, repeated. Wisdom over riches. That's the request worth making when given the choice. A discerning heart, one that can tell the difference between what looks good and what actually is good. Discernment is the ability to see past the surface of things. A discerning woman isn't easily impressed by charm alone. She notices patterns, not just performances. She asks herself quietly, does this person's actions actually match their words over time, or just in the moment? This is the quality that saves women from years of unnecessary heartbreak. Charisma is loud, character is quiet, and it only reveals itself under pressure, under time, under real inconvenience, never in the honeymoon phase. I think of Yolanda, who once dated a man who said all the right things, talked about his future plans, called her wife material within a matter of weeks, said everything a hopeful woman wants to hear. But discernment isn't about ignoring red flags out of fear of being alone. It's about noticing them calmly, without panic. When she started asking herself, how does he treat people who can't do anything for him? How does he handle being told no? The mask came off fast. Discernment saved her 2 years she would have otherwise spent grieving a man who was never who he claimed to be in the beginning. This week, instead of asking, do I like this person? Ask yourself instead, what have their actions actually shown me over time? There's a kind of woman who makes people feel like they're constantly in a courtroom, every kindness logged somewhere, every mistake filed away for a future argument. And then there's a kind of woman who gives freely, forgives freely, and doesn't treat love like a transaction to be balanced. Generosity of spirit means at your core, you're not stingy with grace, compliments, encouragement, or forgiveness. You don't need someone to grovel before you finally release them from a mistake they already know they made. This doesn't mean being generous toward people who consistently abuse it. That's a different conversation entirely, and boundaries still apply. But in the ordinary moments of life, a woman like this is magnetic, because being around her feels safe. People don't have to perform perfection just to be loved by her. This week, give one unearned compliment. Offer one piece of grace you didn't technically have to offer. Notice how it changes the entire temperature of the room around you. Here it is, the one most Christian women get backwards. We've been taught, sometimes without anyone saying it directly, that giving is holy and receiving is selfish. So we become women who pour and pour and pour into everyone around us, and we don't know how to let anyone pour into us in return. We deflect compliments the second they're offered. We insist on paying for everything so we never owe anyone anything. We feel guilty resting. We quietly equate our worth with our output. But there's an old story about 2 sisters, one busy serving in the kitchen, frustrated and overwhelmed, and the other simply sitting and receiving, and the one who sat wasn't rebuked for it. She was affirmed for choosing what was actually better in that moment. A woman who can only give and never receive isn't more virtuous. She's often more guarded. She's protecting herself from the vulnerability of being loved without having to earn it first. And ironically, this makes her exhausting to love, because the people around her never get the chance to give back. They're always somehow in her debt instead. I knew a woman named Priscilla who realized in her 30s that she had never once let a man fully take care of her, plan a date without her fixing it, pay for dinner without a fight over the bill, comfort her without her insisting through tears that she was fine. She thought this made her strong. Her counselor gently pointed out that it actually made her unreachable, closed off in a way that looked like strength but functioned like a wall. Learning to receive, a compliment, help, love, rest, is not weakness. It's an act of trust, and trust is intimacy in its most practical form. This week, receive one thing without deflecting it. A compliment, an offer of help, a kind word spoken to you. Just say, "Thank you," and let it actually land instead of bouncing it away. Loneliness makes women do strange math sometimes. We start believing that if a man isn't choosing us, something must be fundamentally wrong with us. But your worth was settled long before any man ever looked your way, and it isn't up for renegotiation based on someone else's attention. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. Already, past tense, already true, not waiting on anyone's approval to become true someday. A woman who knows this doesn't chase, doesn't shrink, doesn't perform for male attention, because she's not asking a man to complete a sentence that was already finished long before he arrived. This is the quality that changes everything else on this list, because it's the root underneath all of it. When your worth is settled, discipline isn't about earning love. It's about stewardship. Boundaries aren't about the fear of losing someone. They're about basic self-respect. Everything downstream gets healthier once this one thing is settled. Write one sentence. My worth was decided a long time ago, and it does not fluctuate with anyone's attention. Say it out loud, even if it feels strange the first time. This next one is one of the hardest qualities to develop, and one of the most attractive, because bitterness is exhausting to be around, even when it's completely justified. Getting rid of bitterness and rage, choosing kindness and compassion instead. This isn't permission for people to keep hurting you over and over. Forgiveness and boundaries can absolutely coexist. You can forgive someone completely and still never let them back into your life again. A woman who's done this work carries a lightness that other women notice immediately. She's not dragging around every wound from every man who ever mistreated her. She's processed it. She's released her grip on it, and that release makes room for something new to actually come in. Because bitterness, left unchecked, quietly poisons every future relationship, even the good, healthy ones that deserve better than her old wounds. I think of Teresa, who carried resentment from a broken engagement into every relationship that came after it, testing new men against the sins of the last one, without even realizing she was doing it. It wasn't until she did the deep, unglamorous work of forgiveness, not excusing what happened to her, but releasing her grip on it for her own sake, that she stopped unconsciously punishing innocent men for someone else's choices from years earlier. Write a letter you'll never send to the person who hurt you. Say everything you've been holding back, then close it with this: I release you, not because you deserve it, but because I do. Here's a quality most people never think to mention, but it might be one of the most important on this entire list: humility. Specifically, the ability to be wrong without falling apart. A lot of women confuse confidence with always needing to be right. They'll argue a point into the ground rather than admit they misunderstood something, because being wrong feels like a threat to their entire identity instead of just a normal, human moment. But a woman rooted in real humility can say, I was wrong, and I'm sorry, without collapsing into shame or spiraling into self-hatred afterward. She can hear correction without treating it as rejection. She doesn't need to win every conversation to feel secure in who she is. I think of Camille, a woman who used to turn every disagreement with her sister into a debate she had to win, because losing an argument used to feel, somewhere deep down, like losing herself. It took years of inner work before she could simply say, "You're right, I hadn't thought of it that way," without her whole body tensing up in defense. That single skill changed nearly every relationship in her life, because people relax around a woman who doesn't need to be right to feel safe. This week, when you're wrong about something small, practice saying so out loud, quickly, without over-explaining or justifying yourself for 5 minutes afterward. The final quality ties every other one on this list together. A woman who has stopped performing for people and started living for one honest audience, instead of a crowded room of shifting opinions. If someone is still trying to please everyone around them at every moment, they haven't yet found the freedom that comes from answering to something higher than public opinion. That's a strong statement, but it's true. Constant people-pleasing and genuine integrity rarely coexist for long. When you live for that one honest audience instead of a crowd, you stop shape-shifting depending on who's in the room with you. You're the same woman at church, at work, and alone in your car with the radio off. That consistency, that integrity, is one of the rarest, most attractive qualities a person can carry, because most people are exhausting to be around, precisely because they're never quite the same person twice. So here's what I want you to walk away with today. None of these 11 qualities require you to change your face, your body, or your fundamental personality. They require you to go deeper, into your relationship with God, your emotional honesty, your discipline, your discernment, your capacity to give and to receive, your settled worth, your forgiveness, your humility, and your freedom from performing for people who were never going to be satisfied anyway. This is a beauty that doesn't fade at 40. It doesn't require a filter. It doesn't ask anyone's permission to exist in the first place. Here's your challenge for this week. Pick just one quality from everything we talked about, the one that convicted you the most as you were listening, and take one small, practical step toward it. Not all 11 at once, just one. Real transformation happens one honest step at a time, never in one dramatic overhaul that burns out by Wednesday. And if this spoke to you, if even one part of it felt like I was speaking directly into your life today, subscribe and stay with me. Because this is exactly the kind of conversation we have here every single week. Honest conversations for women who are done performing and ready to become who they were actually created to be. I'll see you in the next one.